Welcome back. September 21st marks International Day of Peace. It's a good time to remember the Second World War. After it ended in 1945 with about 75 million deaths, people expected peace and stability, finally. Instead, we have seen more wars as the United States seeks to impose its own political model and deals on others. Is protecting freedom and democracy the real reason, or are there darker motives? Did the lessons learned in Japan, Vietnam, Iraq, and recently in Afghanistan leave no impact at all? In an exclusive interview, eminent American historian, author, and documentary maker Peter Kuznick spoke to my colleague Liu Xin about what makes America wage war at the drop of a hat. Professor Kuznick, welcome to The Point.
Glad to be with you.
Now, on September the 15th, the US, UK, and Australia announced their trilateral military pact called AUKUS, which will start with providing Australia with nuclear-powered submarines. The pact has been condemned by many countries, including France, who feels it has been stabbed in the back. China, of course, it's very much targeting China, and neighbor regional countries such as Malaysia, Indonesia, and of course further apart, DPRK and Iran for concerns about proliferation. Why do you think AUKUS was launched? Now, when the US didn't share technology with any other country except the UK in 1958 in terms of nuclear-sensitive technology?
The Biden administration's focus has been solely on China. From the beginning, Biden has said that he's going to restore America's alliances against China. And this is a very important symbolic and actually concrete step in that direction. You mentioned Afghanistan. Even the withdrawal from Afghanistan was posed in terms of being able to put those resources in the competition with China. So Biden's framework in that regard is very similar to Trump's. Trump saw China as the main threat to the United States and developed a very hostile relationship with China. Biden is doubling down on that. This agreement with Australia and the UK is an important step in that direction because it's an escalation.
What do you think of the potential impact of such a military pact? Is it going to be a tool for peace, as it claims?
No, it's not going to be a tool for peace. What it is a heightening of military tensions in the region. And it makes no sense on the surface. The claim is that Australia wants to, so it can secure the trade lanes in the region. But who is Australia's main trading partner? It's China. So why do they need these nuclear-powered submarines in order to secure the trade lanes with their main trading partner? It makes no sense, but it's what it really is intended, even though they don't say it openly, is part of this growing attempt to isolate China, to build up these forces around China of this kind of alliance. But by undermining the relation with some of the European nations, as Biden has done, Europeans don't want to get drawn into this kind of new Cold War either. And so China's growing economic power gives it a great advantage in dealing with all of these countries. And I just wish that my friends in China were a little bit less assertive and a little more flexible, and it would be in China's own interest and would undermine this U.S. attempt to create this polarized world, which I think is very, very dangerous.
Now, another reason why this piece of news has been very much in the spotlight is the word nuclear, of course. Now, all of the three members of the so-called AUKUS are signatories to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, which is to ensure non-proliferation, disarmament, and peaceful use of nuclear technology. So, Professor Kuznick, do you think AUKUS could breach in any way this treaty? What is the implication on the global non-proliferation efforts?
The original agreement with France was to have diesel-powered submarines. This new agreement with the United States and Britain is to give Australia nuclear-powered submarines. The France and China have nuclear submarines that use a low level of enrichment. This submarines that the United States and Britain are going to be providing Australia has highly enriched uranium, and that's the concern. Technically, according to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, there is a big loophole that this falls into. So it's not technically, one might argue, a violation of the NPT, but it is certainly a violation in spirit, and it opens the door on a couple levels to the potential for proliferation. First of all, the 6 countries that now have nuclear submarines are all nuclear powers. The 5 original members of the NPT and India. Australia is not. So Australia is going to have to get this highly enriched uranium from UK or the US. That can be easily converted to nuclear weapons use. And the IAEA is going to try to monitor it, but it is not clear. That's one big risk. The second big risk is that it sends a message to other countries, Iran, South Korea, Japan, that they also can use this loophole to increase their stock of highly enriched uranium for potential nuclear bomb development. So I think this is a very, very, very dangerous precedent that the United States is setting here. Biden had said initially that he wants to lower the importance of nuclear weapons in America's strategic plans, as Obama tried to do on some level. But Biden's behavior seems to be going the opposite direction. So I think, again, the United States is losing sight of the big picture. The big
what
picture
has driven President Biden to change course on the nuclear strategy or policy?
Biden's policy, his foreign policy, has been very baffling to a lot of people. He pledged to break with Trump's policies across the board. In fact, Biden has been doubling down on most of Trump's policies, legitimizing them in the same way that Obama legitimized many of George W. Bush's policies. Biden is legitimizing many of Donald Trump's reckless policies. And why is he doing this? He's obsessed with China. But you look at the people he brought in there, his foreign policy advisors, whether it's Blinken or Sullivan or Victoria Nuland. I mean, these are hardline, old Cold Warriors, and they were initially involved in the confrontational policies toward Russia, but they also were all part of the pivot to China, pivot to Asia. So in 2011, November 2011, when Hillary Clinton writes her article in Foreign Policy magazine titled America's Pacific Century, these were people Nuland was more involved in Ukraine, of course, but the others were very much involved in this kind of policy shift. So in some sense there, it's not surprising, but I think it's very, very dangerous.
Now, you just now talk about this idea to keep America front and central in the world in the new century. Actually, you were talking about this in the past. You said this kind of war on terror was hatched by a group of people who instigated the project for the new American century. But as we know, Asia has been rising very, very fast and steadily, and there is talk of an Asian century, and that talk seems to be picking up momentum as well. So what happens when these two kinds of talk clash, or when the people who have been advocating an American century in the 21st century find that their wish is probably not coinciding with the reality on the ground?
The Americans have had this vision of unilateralism or unipolarity or hegemony and domination for quite some time. And with the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, that became a reality in their minds. And so they started to talk about Charles Krauthammer, the neoconservative strategist, who said in 1990 that the United States is now the world's unipolar power. So this is the unipolar moment. By 2002, after the invasion of Afghanistan, he'd increased it. He said, this is not the unipolar moment, it's the unipolar era. And the United States is going to dominate not 30 or 40 years like he had predicted, but indefinitely into the future. Then the United States gets bogged down in Iraq, gets bogged down in Afghanistan, later in Libya and Syria. And this whole vision seems to collapse. But the United States has got to learn how to live in a multipolar world. And the thing that we've never seen before, we've seen empires collapse. We've seen empires rise and fall. We've never seen an empire fall that has the military capability to end all life on the planet, to bring the rest of the planet down with it. And that's, to me, the terrifying prospect. How desperate are these people to cling to power, to try to assert their domination, to try to combat China, not only economically, there can be a healthy competition economically, and the competition should be what former Vice President Henry Wallace said it should be between the United States and the Soviet Union, a competition to see who can better serve the needs of humanity. That competition I would like to see. But this kind of military competition, military confrontation, both sides building up their military capabilities, is a path to annihilation, and that I don't want to see.
And that was Professor Peter Kuznick explaining to our Liu Xin what drives America to war again and again and yet again. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point. As always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. Download the CGTN app to watch our show, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. On behalf of the whole team here, thank you so much for watching. And bye for now.